ゴジラ。
Godzilla -1 minus colour? What were they thinking? Why make a black and white movie in this day and age? Well, why not? It was, to be fair, just a special edition, and it was only meant to be released for 1 week. But I think it went on to do more than that, because this makes a big difference. And it makes that difference in a good way, not a bad way. It really brings it to life, believe it or not. Strange, you say? Well, Godzilla -1 has already done a great job because it's just won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, and the Toho studio in Japan that did the effects is only like 35 people. They did over like 601 visual effects. Now, they've done really well. Now, there were some practicals, but they didn't have a lot of budget. I mean, the whole movie was shot on less than $20 million. That's peanuts by Hollywood standards. Absolute peanuts. That's an indie level production budget. So, how did it do so well? Well, they used their practical effects to really, really good effect. They built like stages and things that they could move. When you see people falling off a roof, part of that's practical, but most of it's visual. It's really well done, and it works even better in black and white. There might be some spoilers in this, but if you've not seen Godzilla, you'll know the story. You know, the love story. Huh? What do you mean, a love story? Well, this is a love story. This isn't about a monster wreaking havoc in a town. Well, it is, but that's not the big thing here. Godzilla is a bit part actor. You know, the main thing you come for is the story, and this tells a story. It tells a story of Japan that was decimated after World War II, that was dishonoured, that was humbled, that wasn't even allowed to protect itself after World War II. The people were put down. The people were crushed and humiliated. And for the proud Japanese psyche, this was not something they could take easy. So the story starts with our hero, the Japanese fighter pilot. No, he's not a fighter pilot, he's a kamikaze pilot. But he's kind of chickened out. And this is kind of a recurring theme that's going to run through this movie. Our hero's chickened out. He lands on an island that is for the repair of kamikaze planes. So he lands his plane, tells the chief mechanic there that there's something wrong with it. They check it over. Plane's fine. They look at him suspiciously. Then, during that night, a creature comes ashore. A creature known as Godzilla.
Godzilla. Godzilla. Godzilla.
A creature comes ashore, but it's not a huge creature, but it's still plenty big enough. So the mechanics and the pilot are all taking cover in a trench. They have rifles, but nothing heavier. The chief mechanic asks the failed kamikaze pilot to go to his plane and use the 20mm cannon on there to shoot the creature and thus save them all. So he does. He gets into his plane, he has Godzilla in its sights as it crosses in front of the plane, and he freezes. Again, he fails in his essential mission. As a result, nearly everyone on the island is killed. He's knocked unconscious as Godzilla tosses the plane around. The mechanics are all killed. He wakes up the next morning. The chief mechanic has survived and he's lined up all the bodies of the dead mechanics. Our hero is then last seen on a ship heading back to Tokyo. And he arrives in Tokyo, which has been devastated as a consequence of World War II. And his parents have been killed in the bombing. He's an orphan. His next door neighbour greets him. And then, when she realises that he survived, but was a kamikaze pilot, treats him with disgust, for he has also dishonoured the nation. He's feeling sorry for himself wandering through a market, and a young girl who's thieving from the market and being pursued by shopkeepers plonks a baby on him and runs away. He doesn't know what to do. He sits there with the baby. And then eventually he gets up, he goes to wander away, leaving the baby where it was. Thinks better of it, picks the baby up, wanders around, and eventually the girl says, "You took your time." He can't even succeed at looking after himself, never mind looking after people. This is how him and the girl meet. This is how the girl moves in with him, just by being there. It's not her baby, it's another orphan. She's an orphan, he's an orphan, the baby's an orphan. They've all come together in the ruined, ramshackle remains of his parents' house, and they start to eke out their existence. He looks for work, he gets a job, he starts blowing up mines that had been left by the Americans and the Allies during the Second World War. Nobody talks about Godzilla. This goes on for a little while, and then they come across a ship that's been completely destroyed. And it's like, well, what could have done that? What could have done that? It was an American ship. So it wasn't the Americans that destroyed it. It wasn't the Japanese, because they'd been disarmed. So who destroyed this ship? And then the word starts to be used again. Godzilla. As time passes, the failed kamikaze pilot and the orphaned girl and the orphaned baby grow closer together through the years. They're living almost as man and wife, but not as man and wife. And I think this is starting to annoy the girl, who thinks that maybe things could go further. So she takes a job in the city in order to give herself some independence and to maybe give him a poke in the right direction. As I said, this is a love story. This is not about monsters. This is the monsters ancillary to the plot here. The first plot is a love story. The second plot is the rebuilding of the Japanese psyche and their honour after their humiliation at the hands of the Americans. So while she's working in Ginza and part of Tokyo, the larger Godzilla comes ashore. Now he's grown as well. He comes ashore, he wreaks devastation, and some of the visual effects are fantastic here as the town gets torn apart by stomping in his tail. So the girl gets into trouble because she's in a train and gets knocked out the train, and then she's wandering along the street, and our failed kamikaze pilot comes to rescue her and ends up being rescued by her. So Godzilla lets go his thermal blast. She gets swept away, but before she does so, she pushes him to safety down an alley. So he survives and she's gone. She's disappeared. The place is devastated. She's nowhere to be seen. He's broken-hearted. He goes back, he goes through the motions, he's looking after the child. The Japanese Navy are powerless to do anything because they don't have enough weapons. They don't have any weapons, really. They've all been disarmed. They don't have an army, they don't have an air force, and the Americans don't want to help because the Americans think it would interfere with US-Soviet relations, which were quite fraught at that time. So a ragtag bunch and flotilla of fishing boats and old Navy personnel get together and they come up with a plan where they're going to deal with Godzilla. And one of the scientists comes out with this outlandish, and we're going to sink him into a trench, then we're going to bring him up really quick so as the pressure differences will kill him. And that's all great. And our failed kamikaze pilot, while initially skeptical and not wanting anything to do with it, because he's still in the fit of depression after losing his girl, says he will go along with it and he'll fly a plane that can drag out Godzilla into the bay, into the lure of the ships. And he finds a plane and he gets the old mechanic from the island. They reconcile in what is initially a violent way, but then they come to terms with it. He gets the plane equipped with a bomb, and his secret mission in his own head is to fly into Godzilla's mouth and kill it with the bombs that are part of the aircraft, ultimately fulfilling his destiny as a kamikaze pilot and avenging the death of his loved one. But does he do that? Well, the whole thing is well played out. It goes well. I'm not going to tell you how it ends. Watch But it's a love story and it ends as a love story should. But what about black and white? Why make it in black and white? Well, the black and white version really immerses you in the time period because it's set 45 and onwards, 45, 46, 47. And it really immerses you, and it gives it that aura of being part of the Godzilla franchise, from day one. The monster looks very similar to the old guy in the suit type one. So it's really well done from that perspective. The black and white gives it that authenticity, as I've said, and it's just visceral. It's visceral. It gives you, I don't know what it is, but it makes it much more interesting to watch. And it really captivated me. Because I'm not a big monster movie fan. I'm not a fan of Godzilla, and this movie was completely different. It blew my mind as far as Godzilla goes. By far the best one I've ever seen. So I really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. I'd give this an 8. Easy an 8. Maybe even an 8.5. It's that good. I don't like subtitles. It's only in Japanese. I don't care. It was a great movie and it's well worth watching. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. And you actually don't need to watch this one on a big screen or a huge screen if you don't want to, because the visuals are great, but the story's what compels you. And it's the storytelling that makes it such a good movie, not the visuals. Yes, it won an Oscar for the visuals. Why wasn't it put forward for the story? Because that might have upset even more people in Hollywood. I mean, you think who this was up against? Oppenheimer, Barbie, all the big Hollywood names, and it knocked them all for socks in the visual effects. It's great. Its story's even better. Go watch it. You'll enjoy it. So what of the subplot? What about the reconstitution of the Japanese? What about them getting some of their honour back? Well, that's all played out because they have to do the fight against Godzilla on their own. They can't call in reinforcements from any other country or any other people. They deal with it themselves, and they deal with it themselves as honourable citizens, not even army. And this is part of what they had to do to rebuild their honour, to rebuild themselves as a people, to rebuild themselves as a nation. They had to stand on their own 2 feet. And this film it's an analogy for that. But it's also something that shows you the workings of the Japanese mind and how they differ from us in the West, because they have a different sense of honour, a different code of ethics. That's not to say it's better or worse, it's just different. And this film explores that to a degree. And it really captivated me. Because I'm not a big monster movie fan. I'm not a fan of Godzilla. And this movie was completely different. It blew my mind as far as Godzilla goes. By far the best one I've ever seen. So I really enjoyed it.